What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? We have episode one, the official episode one, I should say, of the Be Great podcast. We're going to talk some more college football today because that's all we're going to be talking about. Got a hopefully a good little episode here for y'all. We're going to be talking about three things. Firstly, of course, right after I uploaded my intro episode onto YouTube, I get we all get the news of the Harbaugh 4-year show cause. So we're going to talk about that first. Then I'm going to take a little detour into something that I want to talk about, not just because I'm a fan of this team, but because I have some things I would like to say about it because I feel like we have a lot of people talking crazy. And so I'm going to be talking about UGA's culture because a lot of people saying a lot of crazy out of pocket things about UGA's culture. So I'm just going to give my point of view and give my take on it. And then to end the show, we're going to do an ACC preview. I'm going to go over who I think the conference champ will be, the conference championship game, the dark horse team, the most surprising team, most disappointing team, and the worst team. And this will be the start of my previews for all the conferences, or the main four. Next week will be the Big Ten, and then the SEC, and then the Big 12. You get my point. And they'll all have the same categories. But that'll be at the end. So, first, let's talk about Harbaugh, Jim Harbaugh, and his 4-year show cause. Basically, he's not allowed to come back to college football in any capacity for 4 years, is the gist of it, right? And again, when it comes to anything related to Michigan and any sort of allegations or whatnot, there's a lot of strong opinions, a lot of varying opinions. Some of them idiotic, most of them idiotic, actually, I'd say. Some of them somewhat knowledgeable. So, firstly, I just want everyone to understand this has absolutely nothing to do with the cheating sign stealing allegation. This is for something completely different. This was for the recruiting during COVID allegations that we heard about a while ago. And this was the result of that. Now, the reason he got hit so hard with it, with 4-year show cause, is because he lied to the NCAA. And that just makes them even more angry when you do that. Now, I don't think Harbaugh really cares that he got a 4-year show cause because he's not coming back to college football anyways. I mean, he's in the NFL, so he's good anyway. I mean, there's no reason for him to come back in any sort of capacity. Now, there is a couple things I wanted to mention that I kind of forgot to mention in my intro episode about when I talked about the Michigan scandal. There's a argument that a lot of Michigan fans make, that Connor Stallions himself makes, and I think an argument he's going to make in the Netflix documentary that I will refuse to watch because, let's be honest, that's just going to be Connor Stallions lying and trying to say this argument that I'm about to say. The biggest argument I've seen from Michigan fans, Michigan apologists, Connor Stallions himself, yada yada yada, is that everyone's doing the whole sign stealing thing. Connor Stallions has a quote in the Netflix documentary that's already been released that says, "If I'm a bad guy, then everybody in college football is a bad guy." I absolutely cannot stand this argument because it's has no basis It has no legs to stand on, and it is illogical. There is a mountain of evidence against Connor Stallions and against Michigan and a lot of their coaches. So you cannot just stand there on some sort of fake moral high ground and say, oh, everyone's doing it. We're just the ones that got caught. If everyone's doing it, where's the evidence? You cannot just say, oh, everyone's doing it without a lick of any type of evidence, tangible or not tangible. You can't do that. And I don't believe everyone is doing it. Because I think if everyone knew that everyone was doing it, I think people would be throwing each other under the bus. But they're not. You're the one that got caught. And I don't know how you think saying, oh, well, everyone else is doing it makes it any better for you, because it doesn't. So I'm tired of that argument. And about the allegation, well, not really an allegation. It's, I mean, with what Harbaugh got hit with today, the 4-year show cause. So with the recruits during COVID, a lot of people, dumb people clearly, seem to think it is because of the hamburger situation. And to explain what I mean by that, I think it was Jim Harbaugh bought a recruit a hamburger, and everyone thinks that because of that situation, and this was during the COVID time, that is why the NCAA is coming after them, which is not true. The fact is they had players on campus during COVID, which you are not allowed to do. Plain and simple. And then what made it even worse is Harbaugh lied about it. Arizona State got in trouble for the exact same thing. They had 10 players on campus and they got a postseason ban. So I think that could be coming Michigan's way. LSU got a postseason ban in, what was it, 2021? I think they got a 1-year postseason ban. I'm sick and tired of Michigan having some fake illogical moral high ground that they think they can stand on above all the other programs, above the rest of us. The fact of the matter is you cheated, and everyone knows you did. You went so far as to send Connor Stallions to the Central Michigan sidelines in disguise, like you're in some sort of James Bond spy movie, bunch of clowns, and have him spy on Michigan State, who was an awful team, by the way. Why do you need to steal their signs? Michigan State was trash. Mel Tucker was 1 foot out the door. But I guess you felt the need to send Connor Stallion's goofy self out there in a whole Central Michigan getup. And Central Michigan is as much to blame as you guys, because Central Michigan knew that was happening, let it happen. So clearly, the whole state of Michigan seems to be just filled with cheaters, but that's besides the point. I think a lot more is coming Michigan's way, and the longer they continue to deny, the longer they continue to be ignorant, the worse it's going to get for them. And the more Harbaugh continues to embarrass himself by saying, oh, I didn't do anything wrong, I'm innocent, I teach my children not to lie or cheat. Buddy, what are you talking about? The longer he continues to do that nonsense, the worse it's going to get. And this leads me into talking about UGA's culture. And I'll explain how the two tie in a second. UGA has had a bunch of players get mainly arrested for speeding, racing. Had one, Ra Thomas, who was arrested for causing harm to children. And there's a narrative going around that UGA's culture is bad, ruined. Kirby Smart's lost the locker room. The program is going to go downhill because Kirby Smart has no control. The culture is is terrible. Kirby's just as bad as Urban Meyer, which is hilarious. That's a hilarious take. I think anyone who thinks that UGA's culture is a bad one is delusional. Yes, there is clearly a speeding and racing problem. However, I forgot who the player was. It Sokovy? It might have been Sokovy or Nitro Tuggle, one of the two. He was it's a freshman receiver. He was arrested downtown Athens. I think it was 3 a.m. Not because of speeding, not because of racing, but because he drove the wrong way on a one way. And that was plastered all over Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. I don't see that as that big of a deal. I mean, if you ever been to down, oh my gosh, I stuttered. If you've ever been to downtown Athens, there's a lot of one ways, and it's kind of confusing. I mean, I know I've accidentally driven the wrong way on a one way in downtown Athens before, so I can't really blame the guy. I mean, he's a freshman, but I don't know why he was arrested for that. But I also can recognize that there's a lot of players who are being arrested for good reason, for speeding, for racing, which is unacceptable. But to say that a team who just recently won back-to-back national championships, and if they would have been in the playoff this past year, you could definitely argue they would have three-peated, and they are one of the two best teams this year. To say that they have a culture problem doesn't make a lick of sense to me. You know, in business school, we're taught, there's a saying that I was taught, and it is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. What that means is you can have the best strategy in the world, but if the culture is a losing culture, if it is a bad culture, it will not matter. You will not succeed. And I think Georgia does not line up with that if you're saying they have a bad culture. And it's just so interesting to me that so many people want to defend, even people who aren't Michigan fans, want to defend them and say, it's not that big of a deal, yada, yada, yada. But yet they also want to clown Georgia and say they have a terrible culture, which is so hypocritical. So Georgia has a bad culture because of all the off the field issues. And by the way, when we had a receiver in Ra Thomas who had a very serious crime alleged against him with causing pain to children, guess what? He's not on the team anymore. Kirby let him go in less than a week. Less than a week. But then you have Michigan. So Georgia has a bad culture, even with that stuff. But Michigan, their culture's fine, even though they're cheating like crazy. They're facing allegations and they're going to get punished for this while they're also getting punished for an allegation of recruiting during COVID from years ago. And they're lying about it and they keep denying that they did it. Or, well, they're not really denying that they did. They kind of accepted that they did it. But they're denying kind of how big of a deal it was. And they keep saying, oh, everyone's doing it. They're not taking any sort of accountability, any sort of responsibility. But their culture's fine. apparently. I just think it's hypocritical. And I don't deny that the UGA thing, it is a problem, but I don't really know what people want Kirby to do. If you think that Kirby should kick anyone off the team who has gotten arrested for speeding or racing or any sort of traffic related thing, I think you are out of your mind. And I think a lot of us at one point or another in our life, or at some point in our life, will get some sort of speeding ticket or something. And we'll see if you think that your boss should fire you because you got a speeding ticket. But you want Kirby to kick these kids off the team because they were speeding. It's ridiculous. No coach in their right mind would do that. Not even Nick Saban. Nick Saban, back when they were playing Georgia in the national championship game, had a player who tried to attack a coach on the sideline, and he still played the rest of the game. So don't come here talking to me about culture issues. Don't come here talking to me about Kirby should kick these kids off the team, because that's ridiculous. But let's calm down. And I'm mainly talking about me. I should calm down. But let's get into the ACC preview, because that's really why we're here. Let's get out of all the negativity. Let's do that. Let's get out of the negativity. We're not about that. So, I'm going to go through each category. I'm going to tell you. By the way, this is a factual list. Okay? This is a factual preview. These are not opinions. This is what will for sure happen. I can guarantee it to you now. So don't question me. So we'll start off. I'll leave the conference championship game and the conference champion until the end. Give a little suspense, This is a performance. We'll start off with the worst team. I think this is pretty unanimous as far as who the worst team is. I have Stanford. Yeah, we're not in the Andrew Luck, Christian McCaffrey days anymore. I think it's going to take some time for Stanford to kind of get back to even close to where they used to be. And they're just nowhere close yet. And having to travel to face teams that are all the way literally across the continent, across the country, is not going to help. Looking at their schedule, they start off with a game against TCU. Now, here's what I will say, and this goes for Cal as well. I do think they have a sneaky sort of advantage when they're at home, because all these ACC teams have to travel all the way to California, and I would imagine they're not really used to that. So it'll be interesting to see how that affects teams who have to travel. Like, for example, November, Louisville has to travel to Stanford. How's that is Louisville going to be up? Are they going to be ready? Now, luckily, Stanford's terrible. So even if they're at half their game, they should still win. But let's go through their schedule real quick. TCU at home. TCU, that is a Friday night game, late at night. But I think that's a win for TCU. I think they're just a lot better than Stanford. Then they have Cal Poly. That's a win. At Syracuse and at Clemson and back-to-back weeks is rough. Having to come across the country 2 weeks in a row for two, in my opinion, solid teams. So I think those are both losses. Virginia Tech, Again, Virginia Tech has to come all the way to California, but Virginia Tech's going to be a really good team. So I think Virginia Tech will beat you. You'll lose to Notre Dame. SMU's an interesting one. I find it kind of hard to gauge SMU, but I'd probably pick SMU to win. Wake Forest, I think Wake Forest is better than you because obviously I labeled you as the worst team. But I actually think I think I would pick you to win that game because Wake Forest isn't good either, and they have to travel to you. NC State, you'll lose. Louisville, you'll lose. Cal, I think you'll lose. And San Jose State, it's weird that you're going to San Jose State, but I'd probably pick you to win that. So that what gives you 3 wins? Uh, it's obviously just not a good season. It's not good enough, and I think it's to be expected. I mean, a lot of people that I've seen talk about the ACC has put Stanford last, and I don't know where their future holds. I I, I think it's weird seeing them in the ACC, and I think the ACC overall is the hardest conference to judge because I think there's a number of teams who could win the ACC. You'll see who I ended up picking, but I think there's 5 or 6 teams that I could see win it. And I can tell you this, I don't think I went with, I think I probably went with the most popular pick to win, but I know there's another popular pick to win the ACC that I don't even have making the conference championship game, but we'll get to that. So, Stanford, sorry, but you're at worst team. Next, this is probably where things get interesting. Most disappointing team. Now, to clarify, this is a team like Stanford's not the most disappointing team because everyone knows they're going to be bad. Wake Forest, same thing. Virginia, same thing. This is more so a team that has some hype, and I just think they're going to majorly disappoint that hype. And for me, I think this is the team that has been the answer to this category for the past 3 years, probably now, ever since they got their new head coach. I have Miami. And I know that there's a lot of people who are hype on Miami, as it is every single year. And there's a lot of people who think Miami's going to win the ACC. I do not feel comfortable picking Miami to win the ACC until I see them actually have a consistent season, actually win big games, and have a season where, quite frankly, they just don't disappoint. They've disappointed every single year since Mario Cristobal has gotten there, and I think it continues. A lot of people, I think, are going to get a reality check. I've been through this Miami schedule. I on the last episode, on the intro episode, if you didn't watch it, go watch it because I had Mario Cristobal on the hot seat. I talked about it. I went through their schedule. I talked about this Florida game where they're at Florida. I will reiterate, it is a must win for Miami. Obviously, they can lose it and still make the conference championship game because that's an out of conference game. But imagine the tone and how people see Miami. Imagine how much that shifts if they lose. And Florida's capable of beating them because it's also at Florida. And I think a lot of people want to write Florida off, me included. And I still don't think they're making a bowl game. Don't get that twisted. But a lot of people want to write this team off. They could beat Miami. They really could. And this Miami schedule is not easy, in my opinion. Because you see, it's a mixture of things for me. You have to have a good team, but you also have to have the schedule to get you there. And Miami doesn't. So they have Florida, which is a scary game to start with for both teams. Then you get two pancakes in Florida A&M and Ball State. You get South Florida, which I think could be a little scary, but I feel confident you'll win. Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech is going to be a very good team. And I think that game, once again, very important. And Virginia Tech is very capable of beating you. And I think this 4-game stretch right here that we're getting into is what led me to saying that I don't think Miami will make it to the conference championship game and make them the most disappointing team. So you have Virginia Tech at home. Then you have at Cal, which you're coming off a big game against Virginia Tech. And then you have to travel all the way to California to face a Cal team who is sneaky good. I don't like that. It feels like a trap. Then you have a bye. Then you get Louisville. At Louisville. That's another hard one. Then you have Florida State, which I think we all know that's a hard one. It concerns me, that 4-game stretch in a matter of 5 weeks because there's a bye in the middle. You could go 0-4. You could. I could see it. I definitely don't think you'll go 4-0. I definitely don't think that. And another problem Miami has is their home field isn't really a home field advantage. No one comes to their games. Now, maybe that changes with the hype. Maybe that changes if they start off strong, if they start off 4-0. Maybe. But I could see this team starting off 4-0 and then be 4-4. Then you have Duke. That should be a win. At Georgia Tech. That one scares me too. Georgia Tech, one of those sneaky, annoying, good teams. Well, I don't know about good, decent teams that beat you last year. Wake Forest, you'll beat. And I said this in the intro episode. I said it. And I'll say it again. I'll reiterate. Syracuse is going to be sneaky. They're going to be sneaky. And I guess this is a spoiler, but we're going to talk about them soon. So I won't go too in depth about Syracuse. But that's also at Syracuse. I think Miami, I think I could realistically come around to them going 7-5. And there are people who are like, oh, Miami's losing one game, conference championship, they're in the playoff, let's go. Are you sure about that? Are you sure about that? I'm not. And look, I like Cam Ward. I like Damian Martinez. But this team has had talent in the past. Last season, they had some talent. Or sorry, 2022, well, the past 2 seasons, they've had some talent. But do we remember in 2022 where they got blown out by Middle Tennessee State? I remember. The final score doesn't indicate that they were blown out. They pretty much were, though. They pretty much were blown out. I remember that game. But we can move on from Miami. I've talked about Miami way too much in these 2 episodes combined. Way too much. Next. Most surprising. If you've listened to last episode and this episode, you should know who my most surprising team is. It's Syracuse. The Orange. And it's a mixture of reasons. The schedule's easy, for one, and I like their team. I like their new coach, Fran Brown. Love it. I like the additions, especially of quarterback Kyle McCord, or as I called him when he was at Ohio State, Honda Accord, because that's how he played. Now, look, that's what I think. I made fun of Kyle McCord when he was at Ohio State because he was bad. Or maybe not bad, maybe mid is the better word. I think he's good for Syracuse, though. I think the expectations and everything at Ohio State was just too much. And I think Syracuse is the right fit and spot for a guy like him. Oronde Gadsden, their tight end who can also play receiver. He's a dog. I like this team. A lot of transfers, but a lot of guys that are still there. They have a lot of returning production. And I think this team is going to be sneaky good. You know what we got to do now? We got to look at the schedule. Like I said, I think their schedule is easy. I could see them starting off 5-0 because they start off with Ohio. I mean, their first 4 games are at home. They have Ohio at home. That's a win. Georgia Tech at home. I think those two teams are kind of similar, but you're at home, so I'd give you the advantage and the win. Stanford at home. That's a win. Holy Cross at home. That's a win. And then, you finally get an away game, but it's against UNLV. Now, I don't love that you have to go all the way to Las Vegas, and UNLV is not a bad team, but I think you're significantly better. So I'd pick you to win that too. Like, I think Syracuse is going to be 5-0. And we're going to be looking and we're going to be like, what? How is Syracuse 5-0? But you're not going to be surprised because I'm telling you, so you should listen. And then they get, I think, their first loss. They have an away game against NC State. NC State's a good team. So I think that's probably going to end up being a loss. They're at Pitt. I think Pitt's going to be pretty bad. So I'd give Syracuse the win. So 6-1, by the way. Then you have Virginia Tech. You'd probably lose. At Boston College, I think you win. I think Bill O'Brien might be decent at Boston College, but it's his first year. So I'd give you the advantage. 7-2, by the way. At Cal, I mean, I've mentioned this. I don't love these ACC teams going all the way to California. I don't love it. And I think Syracuse and Cal are pretty similar. I think Syracuse is a little bit better. But that's kind of a toss-up to me. UConn at home is a win. So if we're not counting the Cal game, you're 8-2. 8-2. Is everyone hearing me? 8-2. And then you get the home game against Miami that I think you can win. But even if you lose it, 8-3, and if you lose to Cal, you're 8-4. You beat Cal 9-3. That is a really good first season. And I think it's 100% possible. 100% possible. I like this Syracuse team, and I think everyone should. I think a lot of people just look at the name or they look at the roster and they say, this team, they're mid. They're mediocre. The schedule matters so much with things like this. That's why I love going through the schedule. But I think the Syracuse Orange are your most surprising team. Then we get the dark horse. Now, to me, dark horse and most surprising is different. Dark horse is a team that most people aren't going to pick to win the conference, but actually has a chance, in my opinion. Syracuse doesn't have a chance to win the conference championship, in my opinion. So that's why they're most surprising, but not dark horse. My dark horse team is NC State, the Wolfpack. Now, their schedule is kind of a mixture of things. It's an interesting one. There's a lot of stuff that I like that's on the easy side, but there's some scary games in there. They have their first game against, it has WCU. I don't know who that is, some cupcake that they'll beat. The Tennessee game's interesting. Now, again, this is an ACC preview, and part of the reason that they're my dark horse is the fact that that game does not matter as far as whether they make the conference championship or not. And I think that's a toss-up as far as who wins. I mean, I think, it's Nico's first game on the road for Tennessee. So right now, if I had to pick, I'd probably pick NC State with Grayson McCall. But that one's a hard one. LA Tech, you'll beat. Clemson, I think it's kind of a toss-up. Northern Illinois, you'll beat. Wake Forest, you'll beat. Syracuse, because you're at home, you'll beat. Again, why does it feel like everyone's going on the road to Cal? I feel like this is the third one I've gone through where they're going on the road to Cal. I like Cal. I love Jaden Knott. Do they leave California? I mean, goodness gracious. But again, going all the way to Cali. But I think you're really talented, so I'll give you the win. And you'll beat Stanford. You'll beat Duke. I mean, look at that stretch. Northern Illinois, Wake Forest, Syracuse, Cal, Stanford, Duke. That's light. That's very light. And only out of, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, those 6 games, 2 of them are on the road. I think that's could be easily 6-0 right there. Plus the win at LA Tech, 7-0, plus the win with WCU, 8-0. So even if you lose to Tennessee and Clemson, you're 8-2 with only 1 loss in the conference. Then you're at Georgia Tech. I think you'll win, making you 9-2. And then at North Carolina, that game could be interesting. I feel like not a lot of people are talking about North Carolina, including myself. It'll be interesting to see how good North Carolina is since they lost Drake May and Devontae Walker. But again, I think this NC State team is fully capable of being there in the conference championship. But obviously, because I picked them as my dark horse, I did not pick them to be in the conference championship. So let's get to that. So obviously there's 2 teams here. The first team I'll talk about is the team that I think is going to be in the conference championship game, but will be the loser of that game. There's a few teams here that could be, I say a few. There's really 3 teams that can be, in my opinion, possible that I haven't, because it's not Miami. They were my most disappointing. It's not NC State. They were my dark horse. There's really 3 other teams that people think are up there as far as can win the conference. I think the loser of the conference championship game is Virginia Tech. I think this Virginia Tech team is good. I think defensively they're going to be scary. And I think the schedule is easy. They avoid having to play Florida State. They avoid Miami, but they don't. They get Clemson at home, though. They're out of conference game. They have 2 out of conference games, but one of them is Vanderbilt, which is basically a cupcake. I said pancake earlier. I'm now realizing that. I meant to say cupcake. I'm getting my cakes mixed up. Anywho, cupcake. Virginia Tech's going to beat Vanderbilt at Vanderbilt. They're going to beat Marshall. They're going to beat Old Dominion. It's very weird that they're going to Old Dominion. I don't know if that's a normal thing, but it's a little weird. So 3-0. Then they get their other out of conference game, which is Rutgers. And I think Rutgers is going to be better this year, but not good enough to be Virginia Tech at Virginia Tech. The Sandstorm is going to swallow them whole. So I'd say Virginia Tech will win, be 4-0. Then you have the at Miami game, which isn't really much of a home field advantage, obviously, as I've mentioned, for Miami. So I'd probably pick Virginia Tech to win. Then you have Stanford and Boston College back to back. I think those are wins. Then you have, but by the way, do they go to Cal as well? No, Cal's just not on the schedule. Interesting. By the way, at the end of this, we're going to go look at Cal's schedule. I had something fishy's going on with them. Georgia Tech, you get them at home, win. Syracuse, win. Clemson could be a hard game, but guess what? You get them at home, win. Duke on the road, win. Virginia is terrible, win. This team could go undefeated. 100,000% could go undefeated in the regular season. The only possible loss, in my opinion, is Miami. Because they're not at home. And I think they could easily be undefeated going into the conference championship game with the other team I'm going to mention, the winner of the conference championship game. And that team is Florida State. Now, Florida State has a harder schedule than Virginia Tech. But I think that at the end, that will bode well for them. So, Florida State has at Georgia Tech in Ireland, week 0, as their first game. I think that's an interesting game. Georgia Tech, it can be scary good, and DJU is going to be tested out the gate. Then they have Boston College on a Monday on week 1 at home. So I think that's a win. I've heard a lot of people talk about this next game against Memphis. A lot of people have Memphis as one of those 3 or 4 group of 5 teams that could be that 12th seed in the playoff. I don't have them as that. I probably shouldn't have spoiled that, but I don't have them as that. But Memphis is a good team that can beat Florida State. I don't think they will, but they could. Oh, look at this. Cal on the road to Florida State. It's good to know Cal's playing an away game. It's good to know that Cal is playing an away game at Florida State. So Florida State will win. They get SMU at SMU. That's an interesting one. I'd give it to Florida State. Clemson, but you're at home. I'd give it to Florida State. Duke, that's a Florida State win. At Miami, obviously, is going to be an interesting game, a hype game. But I'd pick Florida State. UNC, but you get them at home. Notre Dame on the road, I'd pick Notre Dame to win. I think Notre Dame's going to have a good team. So I just don't think you'll be able to overcome that on the road with DJU. Charleston Southern, you'll beat them. And then the Florida game, always interesting. That game is always interesting. But I think I'd pick Florida State since they're at home. So I think conference-wise, Virginia Tech and Florida State will both be undefeated because they don't play each other. But record-wise, I think Virginia Tech will be better than Florida State. But I think Florida State, because they will have been battle tested with a game in Ireland against Georgia Tech, with a good Memphis team, with Clemson, with SMU on the road, with Miami, Notre Dame on the road, and that Miami game's on the road, plus Florida, while Virginia Tech's only getting tested by Vanderbilt and Rutgers. And plus Florida State gets North Carolina. I think that will make Florida State more battle tested, and I think that will help them when they face Virginia Tech. And I would give Florida State the win in the conference championship game because of that. Now, I flipped who I was picking for the ACC, who I was putting as my dark horse, as my most surprising, as who's in my conference championship, because this conference is weird and it's so hard to predict. And I could see a number of teams for each category. So this is easily the conference that I'm the least confident on. But I think that Florida State has proven that they can go undefeated in a regular season, win the ACC. So I think it's safe to pick them. I know that sounds like I'm just picking the safe pick. I'm not. This is what I truly believe. But I have faith that they can do it again. Even though they're going to have a tough path. And I could definitely see the path where they don't even make the conference championship game. But I can also see the path where they win it, obviously, because I picked it. But that is your ACC preview. Let me look at this Cal schedule. How many times? Because maybe it just means all the good teams that I looked at. It just so happened that they were at home. Let's see. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. See, they have 7 home games. Something's fishy about these cats. I'm telling you. Wait, is there a game I'm missing? Oh, well, that's a away game, but so they have 7 home games. Interesting. And 5 away games. One of those away games is Auburn. That's an interesting one. I think Auburn will win. I don't think Cal's ready for Jordan Hare. But next week, we're going to have our Big Ten preview. The Big Ten and the SEC previews, I'm sure, are going to be controversial, perhaps, not because I think I have crazy selections, but because those are the 2 most popular conferences. And so if you don't pick someone's team, they just think you're crazy and call you dumb. But I'm excited. I'm excited to talk about the Big Ten next week. The second best conference. Not to start any arguments, but anyone who thinks that the Big Ten is the best conference in college football is, how do I say this? Dumb. I think that's a good word to use. But next week we got Big Ten. Obviously, we'll do the same categories: worst team, most disappointing, most surprising, dark horse, who's in the championship game, and our conference champ. I will also be doing playoff predictions before the season starts. It will be after week 0, I think. I think it will end up being after week 0. It'll be right before week 1, that week before. And I'm also, with the Big Ten preview, I will also be listing the 10 games, top 10 games, matchups, whatever you want to call them, that I am most excited for this upcoming season, plus some honorable mentions. So be listening in for that. Then we will have, so that's all for next episode, unless I just find something that I want to talk about. If anything in the news happens. Like if Brandon Ayuk gets traded to my Steelers, I might have to say something about it. But then we have, for the SEC preview, we obviously have the SEC preview, and then that will be when I give my preview and prediction for Florida State versus Georgia Tech in Ireland. Good old Ireland. I've been to Dublin, Ireland. Great city, great country. Not as many gingers as I thought there would be, but there was one in the airport. And then right before week 1, I will go over what happened in the Florida State Georgia Tech game. We'll have our Big 12 preview. We'll have our playoff predictions. We'll have our week 1 game picks. That will be a busy episode, a crazy episode, an exciting episode. You're going to be getting chills. It's when the chills will start coming because college football is here because it's August. I think we have a preseason NFL game tonight between, the Patriots and the Panthers. Who cares? I don't. But hey, it's football, I guess. But I hope you all are excited for the football season. I know I am. I'm ready to get rolling. I'm ready to watch so much football. Just a little heads up, though. The Saturday, actually, that week 1 Saturday, I'm actually going out of town for vacation. And I will be gone that entire week, and I'll be coming back on the Saturday of the week 2 games. So I don't think I'll be able to get out an episode between week 1 and week 2. Unfortunately, me reacting to the games that happened and picking games for week 2. I might just pick games for week 2 when I pick games for week 1, just so I have that. But I will probably just end up doing a few episodes, though, between week 2 and week 3 to kind of make up for it. And yeah, then there should be no breaks, no stoppages, no hesitations, and we'll just roll right on through the rest of the season. And don't worry, even though I'll be on vacation, I'll be watching ball. Don't even worry about it. Don't worry about that. But if anyone is listening, thank you for listening. It's been, once again, I'm enjoying this so much. I actually decided to just record this episode before I was even planning to because I was just so excited. I'll get this up on YouTube as soon as I can. But I'm so excited for this podcast and doing this the rest of the season. And if I keep on enjoying it, even if I don't get some sort of following or subscriber base, I don't really care. As long as I enjoy doing this, I'll do content in the off season as well. There's always stuff to talk about. Always. But thank you for listening. If you want to leave a like, then leave the like. If you want to subscribe, then subscribe. If you want to share, you can share. Have a great day.